Hey everyone, and welcome on into the first in my video series on the tribes for Season 4 of Hearthstone Battlegrounds. We'll be going over the Demon Tribe today. We'll be going over each of the individual cards, my quick thoughts on each of them, and things you should be looking out for and how they kind of synergize together. This will not be an exhaustive list of endgame compositions, simply things to look out for, cards synergizing within demons, and also how they might synergize with a couple other cards in other tribes as well. So to start off with, in Tavern Tier 1, we have Wrathweaver, aka Jesse. Jesse is a 1/4 neutral minion that gains stronger whenever you play a demon, however you deal 1 damage to your hero when you do so. This would normally lend itself to a more APM style of demon play, where you play a lot of demons and cycle through them quickly in order to damage yourself. However, without any natural gold generation in demons, that becomes a little bit tougher to do. However, that isn't to say that Jesse still can't scale throughout the course of the game. With the right setup, you can still play a lot of demons and get a respectable number of stats on Jesse, and he can become a very big threat in the mid to late game that can be problematic for your opponents to deal with. In order to make the best use out of this, you'll want to grab Soul Rewinder at Tavern Tier 2, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Next up, let's talk about Picky Eater. As it says, when you play it, you consume a minion in Bob's Tavern at random and gain its stats. This is very tavern dependent, as you can eat something like an Icky Imp, which would just make this a 2/2 pretty vanilla, or something like a Swamp Striker, which would make it 2/5, Thorncapped would make it 5/3. So depending on your shop, this could get a lot of value and trade favorably into other 1-drops in the lobby. However, even in the mid game, you can get some pretty decent value out of this if you've been buffing up the shop with things like Felemental, other elementals, or if you have Legion Overseer on the board. When you triple this, you can play it again, it keeps the stats, eats another minion, and gains twice those stats. So even in the mid game, depending on the size of your tavern and what it eats, you could very easily get like a 20-15, 15-15 minion out on the board, which could carry you for quite a while as you try to find other pieces and become stronger. Next up for Tier 1 demons, we have the Icky Imp. Icky Imp summons 2 other 1/1 imps when it dies, which is our token minion for Tavern Tier 1 on demons. While I generally don't value this very highly, I will still pick this sometimes if I'm expecting my opponent to have something like Risen Rider, which this beats, the Mana Saber, or a Scallywag, as this can beat all of them, which is very nice. If I'm also playing a hero such as Greybow or Terran Gorefiend, or somebody in general that benefits from Avenge synergies or can trigger the Death Rattle pretty easily, I'll go ahead and pick Icky Imp. To round out our Tier 1s, we have Mistake. Mistake is interesting because it counts as all minion types. Its stat line to start with isn't really that impressive, but for demons in particular, it can take advantage of things like Mind Muck to consume a minion in the shop at random, or Famished Fellbat, where it will consume another minion at the end of every turn. Mistake really is lobby dependent. It depends on what other tribes are in the game, and it really takes advantage of other targeted tribal effects. Things like Smogger that will cause it to gain stats because it's an elemental. If it can be magnetized with mechs in the lobby, that will really help its value as well. It basically tries to draw benefit from every other tribe, and then in demons in particular, like we said, its most likely thing will be to consume minions in the shop. I don't usually take this at turn 1, but if I think it's a good lobby with some of the aforementioned effects, I will. To start off Tavern Tier 2, let's look at one of the most important cards for Direction in Demons, and that is Soul Rewinder. As Soul Rewinder says, whenever you take damage, you rewind it, and Soul Rewinder gains health. There are a couple things to note about this, the first of which being, if you have 2 Soul Rewinders on the field and you would lose health, you do not then super rewind and gain health. For example, if you start at 28 health and take 1 damage from your Wrathweaver, you will not go from 27 and then go back up to 29 with 2 Soul Rewinders. You cannot end up with more health than what you started with because of Soul Rewinder. If you were to use the Tier 5 demon who discovers a demon for you and then your hero takes damage equal to that demon's Tavern Tier, but you only have 3 health left on your hero, you will only be offered Tavern Tier 1 and 2 demons, seeing as anything else would then kill you and Soul Rewinder wouldn't be able to trigger. We've already talked about Soul Rewinder's interactions with Jesse and Imposing Percussionist. There are a couple other interactions you'll want to look out for. Malchezaar on Tavern Tier 3, which we'll talk about, is a great one to combine with Soul Rewinder, and as well as the hero Lich Bazal. I have no clue how to pronounce that, but Soul Rewinder will actually rewind the damage he takes from his own hero power, making it a very powerful combination and allowing you to essentially get a minion of your choice for just 1 gold every turn. There are plenty of other self-damaging interactions with demons in the game, but these were the main ones you should probably keep an eye out for if you get Soul Rewinder early. Right after Soul Rewinder, let's talk about one of the cards that can take advantage of it, and that's the Tier 2 demon, Backstage Security. Backstage Security is a 4/6 demon with the downside of dealing 1 damage to yourself at the beginning of every turn. Now, this is actually a very large minion for Tavern Tier 2. It can do a lot of work, and if you have Soul Rewinder, you actually gain benefits from its quote-unquote downside. If you need something big to put on the board to buy yourself a couple turns and just be a little bit of a tempo play, Backstage Security is it. While it's a straightforward card, we'll go ahead and mention a couple of the other cards that can synergize with it, and these cards in general will stay the same for most of your self-damaging effects and demons. Those are the Soul Rewinder, as we've already talked about, and Tichondrius at Tavern Tier 5. Both of those are very solid and can really make a build go and give you scaling throughout the game. Next up in Tier 2, let's talk about Mind Muck. Mind Muck is a 3/2 demon, and its battle cry is you target another demon, and that demon consumes a random minion in Bob's Tavern. This can be really nice on like turn 3 if you're doing a normal curve, where you get not only a 3/2 body, which can do some damage, but you also get a whole bunch of stats, hopefully, on another one of your demons. As long as you already have another demon on the board, it's kind of like getting 2 minions worth of stats onto your board on turn 3, which can be a really nice tempo swing, can carry you through a combat or two. And Mind Muck is also something you can play throughout the course of the game if you're trying to cycle demons for something like Jesse. Instead of just playing a demon for no return, this gets you stats on the board, and if you've already buffed up the shop through things like Legion Overseer and Felemental, like we talked about with Picky Eater, this could be a nice little consolation prize for cycling through your demons. To round out Tavern Tier 2, let's talk about Impulsive Trickster. Impulsive Trickster, when it dies, gives its maximum health to another friendly random minion. If it is golden, it does this twice. Because it's a death rattle, it can synergize well with Titus Rivendare at Tavern Tier 5. You can get a bunch of health on your minions during combat if you can find a way to buff the Impulsive Trickster and to have it die early. You can do this by giving it taunt through like Sparring Partner. You can also target it with like Mind Mucks to get more and more health. If you are able to buff Impulsive Trickster's health quite a bit, one notable interaction it has outside of demons is with the Terragosa minion from Dragons. Because Terragosa keeps any enchantments it receives during combat, any health it gains from Impulsive Trickster, it'll keep permanently. If you are able to combine these two, you can get a ton of permanent health on Terragosa, turning it into a very, very beefy minion pretty early on. We've talked about it before in this video, but let's start off Tier 3 with the Felemental. Felemental's battle cry, whenever you play it, minions of Bob's Tavern get permanent +1/+1. If you're able to play these guys quite a few times over the course of a game or get multiple battle cries out, you can really buff up your shop, which really helps demons devour effects from things like Mind Muck, Famished Fellbat, and a couple other things. Its dual typing of Elemental and Demon means it can also be buffed by things like Smogger occasionally as the game goes along, or if you're buffing up Elementals in the Tavern with some of the things the Elemental tribe has going for it, you can buy a Felemental and it'll be reasonably strong even at later points in the game. One notable synergy to notice outside of Elementals and Demons is the synergy that Felemental will have with the Rylak Metalhead. Because stats gained by Rylak Metalhead during combat usually aren't permanent, effects that happen that aren't stat-based for your board are really important, and therefore the Felemental's stat boost to the shop is permanent and can really snowball if you're able to take advantage of it. Let's continue on the trend of buffing up the shop. Let's go with Legion Overseer. While this isn't a permanent shop buff, the +2/+1 it temporarily gives you, or +4/+2 if it's golden, can be a really nice tempo play as you're just trying to buy value units in the early parts of the mid-game. Especially if you haven't really found a direction, you can get a lot of value out of this card. And if you combine it with Devour effects, you can get a slightly more beneficial boost to those effects, even if it's just temporary for a minion or two. This guy probably won't be on your endgame board, but again, in the early mid-game, it can be a nice tempo swing. The 4-2 body's decent, little low on health, but you can probably find ways to scale that up as well. Let's move on to Leeching Fellhound. Leeching Fellhound is a unique effect where instead of gold, you pay health to buy it. This works really well if you already have things that synergize with self-damage, such as Soul Rewinder to practically negate the health cost, as long as you start off with more than 3, or Tichondrius that can scale your entire board when you do it, stuff like that. Leeching Fellhound goes from okay, this is just a 3-3 to something that can really help you cycle through demons more quickly and get a ton of stats with the right setup. Keyboard Igniter provides some conditional scaling for your demons. It's not a ton, but if you have quite a few of them, it could be a nice little chunk in the early stages of the game. Basically, you have to damage yourself since the last turn. This also counts if you have lost the last fight, and then all of your demons get stats. This isn't a ton, and it's other demons, so it doesn't buff itself, but again, if you have things like an Impulsive Trickster that wants to health, or 3 or 4 other demons, this can add up and be like 20 total stats worth. Not a horribly impressive card right now, but in the right setup with the right board, it could be enough to help you win a couple extra fights as you're transitioning towards the later stages of the game. Finally, in Tier 3, we have Malchezaar. Malchezaar doesn't have a super impressive stat line, however, its effect does so much for demons, especially with the self-damaging synergy. 2 refreshes each turn cost health instead of gold. We've already talked about Soul Rewinder, and we've mentioned Tichondrius a couple of times. This effect can be huge with Tichondrius scaling as well. It also synergizes well with the Treasure Hunter Elise. That card lets you get a golden minion in your shop after 5 refreshes. This gives you 2 of them, not just for free with Soul Rewinder on the field, but for actual benefits, allowing you to scale yourself towards a golden minion that can get you a triple reward and can be a taunt if you really need it. Add in Tichondrius, you're getting 2 Tichondrius triggers a turn, 4 if you have either 2 Malchezaars or a golden Malchezaar. This card does so much. It is so good with the right setup. If you don't have self-damaging setup, it's okay. You can still get the extra refreshes out of it for 2 health if you don't have a Soul Rewinder, which might help you search for something that you really need to make your build work. But again, in the right setup, this card is a staple for self-damaging compositions. So there are only 2 options at Tavern Tier 4 for demons, and let's start with the first one, which is Annihilarian Battlemaster. First and foremost, it wasn't until I was editing this video and saw a close-up of the card that I noticed it was Annihilarian and not Annihilating. I just thought it was Annihilating the entire time. So I recorded this like 3 times because I kept trying to say Annihilating. However, Annihilarian Battlemaster is a 3-1 with a battle cry that it gains 2 health for each health your hero is missing. This can be combined with things like Brand to get a ton of health, even if you haven't lost a ton of health. Say you've only lost 10 throughout the course of the game. You play this, it's a 321. If you have Brand out, say you tripled into something at Tavern Tier 4, and you got a Brand, that's a 341. This can also be combined with Rylak that we talked about earlier. While Rylak stats are temporary, the amount of health the Battlemaster can gain is huge and can make a significant difference during a battle. If you can find a way to scale the Battlemaster's attack, this can become a very beefy card that is difficult for your opponent to remove without the likes of things like Leroy or Venomous. Next up, we have Ring Matron. Ring Matron is a 6-4 taunt who has the Death Rattle, summon 2 3/2 imps. This, as a Death Rattle, could be combined with things like Monstrous Macaw or Titus Rivendare. However, as a taunt, you're usually not going to have the board space to get both the Death Rattle from one of those out, and then also the Death Rattle from the Ring Matron actually dying. That would be 4 3/2 imps total. The imps themselves aren't huge, but if you're somehow scaling taunts, this could be a nice card to throw in later on. And also, if you're playing a hero like Greybow, who can give taunt to the imps, this could be a way to preserve attack order within demons, or just as a thrown-in card if you really need attack order for other tribes. This can also be used with cards with Avenge synergies, things like Ghoul of the Feast, Fell Stomper, and Hungering Abomination can all get some use out of the Death Rattle effect from Ring Matron. With Tier 4 out of the way, let's kick off Tier 5 with the minion we've been referencing pretty much throughout this entire video, Tichondrius. Every time your hero takes damage, give your other demons +1/+1. There are a lot of ways to deal damage to yourself, whether through Jesse, through Malkazar, Leeching Fellhound, Backstage Security, Imposing Percussionist that we'll talk about in a second. There are a lot of ways to do damage with yourself. With Tichondrius on the field, this lets you scale up your other demons very nicely. Now note, it is other demons, so Tichondrius will not scale himself. However, if you happen to have two Tichondriuses on the field, Tichondrii? If you have to have two Tichondrii on the field, they will scale each other. They won't get the +2/+2 all of your other demons will get, but they will give each other +1/+1 every time you take a point of damage. Next up in Tier 5, we have Insatiable Urzul, a 4/6 taunt minion. However, after you play a demon, Urzul consumes another random minion in the tavern to gain stats. Now, before we go any farther, everyone should note, Urzul will always either consume the lowest statted minion of the shop, or the one you don't want it to eat for a triple or something. It doesn't say that on the card, it's not hard-coded into the game, it's just the law of the universe. Urzul will eat what you don't want it to every time. Now, with that being said, this can scale up really nicely if you're able to cycle through a lot of demons, if you have Soul Rewinder and Jesse to get even more benefit out of playing them. This card on its own, even without a whole lot of other support, can become a fairly bulky taunt that forces your opponents to either play a Venomous or a Leroy to deal with. Our demon generator is Imposing Percussionist at Tier 5. This is kind of similar to Tavern Tempest for elementals, but for a couple key differences. One, we get to discover a demon. This gives us a choice of 3 potential demons to take, and then we also take damage equal to that demon's tier. Now, as mentioned earlier, we have to have the health in order to take a demon. If we're at 3 health, we will only be offered Tavern Tier 1 or 2 demons. If we only have 5 health, we'll only be offered Taverns 1 through 4 demons. As a battle cry that generates more minions, this also works very well with Bran. It also becomes a gold neutral buy if you have Bran out, as you can buy the Imposing Percussionist for 3 gold initially, and then you would just end up discovering 2 demons, each of which sell for gold for a total of 3 back. You would then get the benefits of playing those demons, whether it's through Jesse or Urzul and stuff like that. Alrighty, so let's get into the top of the table for demons at Tier 6, starting with Fell Stomper. Fell Stomper doesn't have a ton of inherent synergies with demons. Whenever you summon a minion in combat, all of your other minions gain +3 attack. You'll really see this used a lot in Beast and Undead builds that have Reborns and can summon a lot of beasts like Rat Pack and Sewer Rat and things like that, and you can get a ton of attack on your minions if you can set it up correctly. Really, in demons, the only thing you'll really be using late in the game realistically might be Ring Matron in demons. You probably won't be using Icky Imp at this point, and Ring Matron's really the only other thing that will summon demons for you throughout a combat that you could be using. However, again, like I said, in other builds like Beast and Undead, you can really get a lot of value out of this guy, but in terms of a pure demonic tribal game, it probably isn't going to do a whole ton for you. Second in Tier 6, let's look at Mechadraxus. Kind of similar to the Percussionist, Mechadraxus can generate demons for you, but the big thing about these demons that it generates is they come from a very select pool, and they can be magnetized to either mechs or demons. Magnetized just means you place them to the left of the minion you want to attach them to, and they will be absorbed by that minion, and that minion will gain its effects and stats, which can be very helpful. This is a way to give your Impulsive Tricksters taunt if you want them to, and just generally scale up some of your minions. This can also count for scaling up Jesse, Urzul, and minions such as that want you to play more and more demons. Again, similar to the Percussionist, if you have a Bran out, Draxus also becomes gold neutral. You buy Draxus with Bran out, You get the 2 demons, you sell that and the 2 others for a total of 3 back. Again, great for cycling, but a lot of times you will want to grab and magnetize the demons that Jiraxis creates. And finally, our last minion to talk about in demons will be the famished Fellbat. Fellbat means at the end of your turn, your other demons consume a minion in Bob's Tavern and gain its stats. Unlike other consume effects in Demon, this isn't a trigger like Urzul is by playing another demon, nor is it a battle cry like Mind Muck. It is an end of turn effect. As such, it can be influenced and multiplied by the Drakari Enchanter card. However, that is not recommended unless you only have a couple of demons on the field. If you have a full board of demons, you're going to be eating every minion in Bob's Tavern at the end of your turn anyway, and the Drakari Enchanter effect will be wasted. However, if you only have 2 or 3 other demons on the field, as Fellbat says, other demons, and it does not itself consume one, then yes, Drakari Enchanter can double the amount of minions you consume, and therefore roughly double the stats you could expect to get on your board with only a couple of demons. This can be an excellent way to continuously scale your demons through the late game, especially if you've busted your shop in manners similar to how we've already talked about with Mind Muck and Urzul. Even as an ending card, this could be okay if you don't want a scam card like Leroy or Manted Queen, as it can put some extra stats on your other demons and just give them a little more oomph at the end of your turn to help you push through the late game. An early Fellbat can go a long way because turn after turn, you'll be getting that many more extra stats. So if you manage to find an early Fellbat, even with just 2 or 3 other demons, you can still get a lot of value out of the Fellbat. Similar to Tichondrius, if you have a second Fellbat, each Fellbat will then consume 1 minion in Bob's Tavern, while your other demons will consume 2. You can run into some issues with this if you have more than the 2 Fellbats and 1 or 2 other demons, as there will be a lot of consumes wasted. So you just want to be careful with how many minions are in Bob's Tavern and how many demons plus 2 Fellbats you have on the board. That wraps up our overview of demons in Season 4 of Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Things will change as balance patches come out and other things are added and removed from the game, but keep an eye out for our other tribe overviews coming out, hopefully in the coming weeks. If there are any suggestions you guys have or feedback, please leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching, hope this helps, and see everyone next time.